Hello, viewers. Welcome to Tech Simplified TV and a very warm welcome to the Semiconductor podcast. Today, our guest is Nitin Dahad. He's our honorable guest, a trained engineer, has spent almost more than 40 years in this field as an engineer, as an journalist, mentor, entrepreneur. He understands startup ecosystem because once upon a time he was a part of startup. Right now, he's serving as an editor-in-chief of the prestigious E-Times. E-Times started its journey in 1972, much before I was born. So you can imagine. And to me, Nitin is the celebrity interviewer. He can interview all the big shots of our industry. I will share the link of Silicon Grapevine and just go and watch those videos. Amazing videos, amazing insights from industry leader. You will get to learn so many things just hearing. So welcome Nitin, welcome, a very warm welcome. You have accepted our invitation. That's a big thing for us. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. I've just got off the plane yesterday from Spain. I was in the US for the first 2 weeks, so it's been a roller coaster already for 2025.
Yeah, and all those your pictures with those big cars. One day I would love to have a picture with those big dumpers, yellow dumpers. I love them.
So that we'll go on to some technology trends later, but one of the big things that I was seeing at CES, those were those big autonomous tractors, and John Deere is the company there that was promoting those. But autonomy is a big thing, and I think although we think when we think autonomy, just autonomous vehicles, there are many other industries which can benefit from it. But we'll talk about that later, I guess.
Okay. So we would start with your story. Share your story, your journey in your own words. That will inspire freshers, youngsters, everyone. Share your story.
Interesting. You said E-Times started way before you were born. I think I would have been 10 years old when it started. So that gives you a sort of idea of my sort of pedigree in terms of where I am in age-wise. But I think my journey's... I'm an Indian, but I came to the UK in the 60s when my dad came here because he basically wanted to explore new horizons, and he came here. He was a chemist from Pune. He studied chemistry, masters in Pune, and then he came here and became, I think, a well-known figure in the printed circuit manufacturing industry. In the UK, so I used to run PCB manufacturing companies, but that sort of brought me here, obviously. So I came as a child and grew up schooling and everything. But I guess my first interest in the electronics industry, well, actually, I was first inspired by my aunt in a hospital in Mumbai, and I'd gone there when I was 12 years old to visit India. And I said, "Oh, wow, she's doing really well," because she was a gynecologist and used to run a hospital. But I was so inspired by what she did. I said, "I want to be a scientist. I want to do medicine." And so I pursued a career in school, trying to sort of get the qualifications for medicine. But we'll come to that. But then another thing, around 15 or 16, in my physics lesson at school, I think I'd made a lie detector, a very simple moisture detector, and basically it really impressed everybody. Okay, you're telling a lie, you're not. You have, did you do this? Did you do that? It was fun in school with other children, just playing with that. So there's two key influences, like the science and the medicine and the electronics. And there's another one I think at school. I think in the 70s. In the UK, we have there are Christmas lectures at the Royal Institute, and I live in the UK. So there's a Professor Carl Sagan, and I think many of your viewers will probably know if you Google Carl Sagan, I think it's with a K. I'm not sure, but he inspired me with his Christmas lectures on astronomy. So you've got medicine, you've got electronics, you've got astronomy. Now, what do you do? So an Indian child, as he grows up, is always encouraged to go to university. I tried for 2 years running to try and get into medicine, but didn't have the grades. So then I fell into the university in London, where they said, okay, we have places in electronic engineering. So you can join if you want. So I said, okay, I'll join. So I never had any intention to study electronic engineering, but it happened. And that's kind of my whole career has been on serendipity, being in the right place at the right time. So it's happened to be there. I called up and they said, okay, well, join. So I ended up doing an electronic engineering degree. But after 2 years, I got so bored of the maths and the physics. I said, there's no real world application here. So then I basically I saw a little advert in the university campus. It said internships at a company called National Semiconductor. So I thought, okay, well, my course was a 3-year course, electronics. So I had to graduate, but I decided to take after 2 years, 1 year out, and do this internship at National. I got that place, and I learned so much there. What I would recommend always is get some practical experience, and I think in the 80s maybe it wasn't so much of a big thing unless you were a part of a company and you were sent to do your degree. But nowadays apprenticeships and internships are so important and so good. So I think definitely it's something that I would recommend anytime. But that 1 year National Semiconductor, just to give you an idea, that time you used to have big, thick data books for each component, or lots of components, the analog, the digital, and all that. And so I had shelves of data books. And my job was a technical support engineer. So I had customers would call and they'd say, well, I'm having a problem with this op amp, or I'm having a problem with this. And my job was to figure out how to address their problem, just with referencing data books, talking to the engineers, the other senior engineers. And so I would probably answer about 30 to 50 calls a day, which is like a call center for electronics, but maybe I exaggerate, but that's kind of what it felt like. So when you're doing that kind of repetition of problems and whatever, then you realize, okay, I'm learning something, and then it sticks in your head. And one of the biggest, and I think people will smile with this, is the thing I learned then is with small, sort of integrated circuits, the best solution always was power down, reset, and power up again. And it's it's worked ever since. People still, the solution is always, even with your computers or your phone these days, it's power down, power up again. Even with your consumer electronics goods, if something doesn't work, power down, power up. If you go to, I don't know, sometimes I've seen on screens on airport screens, where they do the departures or whatever, and it says somewhere error, it's powering down and rebooting or something. So it's the common problem. That's kind of what I learned. So anyway, long story short, that gave me a lot. And then when I went back to university, I was, I think, better informed. But you might ask here, your next question might be, how did I fall into journalism? Well, that was then so that was 84, 85. And then that was, so I've, every 5 years, the semiconductor industry goes through, the cycles, so, boom and then bust. So 85 was a big recession, 85, 86. So National Semiconductor had closed their fab in Scotland, and they were on, I think, on a 3-day week here in the office where I was working. So then they didn't have anything for me. So I sat around in the summer, not doing anything, looking in job ads. And then I saw a small advert in the local newspaper, main newspaper called The Guardian here, the Guardian newspaper. And every Thursday they would have computing jobs. So that was a good place if you wanted to look for, computing, electronics. And there's a tiny advert, maybe 1 inch by 1 inch. It said, 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. It said, editor required recent electronics degree. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll join. I took my lab books and for the interview, and he said, yeah, looks good. You can join next week. So good lab books can get you somewhere. So to all the students on the call, make sure you make your notes. It might get you noticed. Yeah, that's how I started. Again, I talk about serendipity. It's being in the right place at the right time. They needed an editor. I needed something to do. So it worked well. I didn't know how. I didn't know. And the first thing about journalism, how to produce a print magazine. So I learned very quickly on the job. I think one of my first press conferences, really, after joining, was actually a national semiconductor press conference. Quite ironic.
Yes.
Writing about them. So anyway, it's kind of that's where I started. If you want to know, I think I have written a blog on this on LinkedIn, so you can definitely have a look on LinkedIn. And if you do a Google search on my name, you can find lots of things. But I think I've written that 40-year journey as a little blog on LinkedIn with all my influences. So I'm not going to bore you with it now. I suppose the key
And
things are. Sorry, go on.
I want to say one thing, that not every engineer would respond to a ad where editor is required. It's not always you are right time, right place. Sometimes you universe is sending something and you grabbed it also. You responded to it. That's why you are here today. I think so.
Well,
Because the first
well,
thing you responded.
so
Not
I
many
mean,
engineer would go there.
imagine you're reading the Times of India and you're just looking at the property pages, the lifestyle, page 3 and whatever, and then all of a sudden you just see electronics. Then you look at that, and that's kind of what I did. I
Yes.
sort of looked at electronics. So I think electronics degree as well. So I think that even helped. Yeah.
So should we move to the next question?
Well, we can move, but if you want to know just a quick summary of, because I think you did ask me about my journey,
Yeah,
a quick
sure.
summary. I mean, although the details are on
Mm,
my blog on
mm,
LinkedIn, but so journalism, and then I moved into PR, and then so I worked for a PR agency. So the thing is, like, as every young, and I think Indian engineers, young European engineers, US engineers all do the same. They're looking for their next job to both enhance their career, but also enhance salary. And
yeah.
since we just had our first child, I couldn't survive on what I was earning as an editor. So I moved into the world of PR, but stayed in technology PR. I got bored in the agency, so I wanted to go back into electronics. So I found a job at Marconi Instruments, which was test and measurement equipment at the time, just very close to me. So 6 years I spent just working in PR and marketing and learning a lot, working in a large 3,000 person company. Basically, it was again another recession, 1990. So yeah, the 5-year cycles. So then we shed a lot of jobs. I learned a lot about crisis communications. I learned a lot about desktop publishing because we had our first desktop publishing system then. I learned about all the radio test equipment. I learned about microwave spectrum analyzers, automatic test equipment, because those were all
Okay.
our products. But what I had to do was I had to dig into what's key about them and then write about it for either press releases or articles, so we can get it into the media, so that the media would write about it. So it was actually quite a fun job because as an electronic engineer, you get to write about the technology. I think I remember one piece of test equipment. It was based on a transputer, and like transputer was like the big thing in the 80s. When I wrote, it was based on the transputer. The Financial Times technology correspondent picked that up. So my claim to fame there was I got a little piece in the Financial Times in London, so based for our product because it was based on a transputer. But anyway, then I moved to GC Plessey Semiconductors, and in an international PR role. So I was doing a sort of global corporate role, and then we had our second child. So then I decided, okay, I need to be home for a while because I was traveling every 3 months, 5 countries in Asia, East and West Coast US, France and Germany and UK. So yeah, it wasn't sustainable. So I spent 2 years working in a UK company, UK agency, got bored. And that's when I met this startup, which was a microprocessor startup, And many of you might have designed with something called an ARC processor. So I was part of the startup team at the ARC ARC International. It was called Argonaut Risk Cause. And again, there's a blog on EE Times on that journey with Argonaut Risk Cause and ARC Cause and ARC International. And they got acquired by Synopsys. That was actually the formative part of my learning the entrepreneurship. So my CEO, American CEO, he said, we want to do an IPO in 2 years when I joined. And IPO, initial public offering on the London Stock Exchange. So we're a startup, 18 engineers, myself, CEO, and I think a general manager. So hit the ground running, working 24 hours a day. When you do startups, it basically, you do every job. You're not, and we raised, I think the first one was £5.9 million, and then total £140 million over 2 years, and culminated in a $1 billion IPO in September 2000. Now, that sounds amazing. Zero to IPO in 2 years, and it was amazing. It was a really grueling journey, but you learn a lot from it, and I think that gives you everything. So you've got my sort of solid corporate experience from the last few years, and then you've got the startup experience in a space of 2 years, which is the one thing I learned there, because we were a UK company, but customers in the US. And this is common for a lot of companies, whether they're Indian, whether they're European. The target market is always Silicon Valley or somewhere in the US, because all the decision makers are there. If you look now today, all the CEOs were with the US president. The tech influence really does come from there. And I think in this era now, with the new wave in the US, it's going to be even more so. Hopefully India might have some say in it. I know Indians have presence there, but I think Indians never have really fully influenced India. And that's another part of my journey, which I'll come to another time, is I've never really figured out how India plays in this whole global scene, because I've tried to write about it many times. Although I write objectively, but also not negatively, I think it still takes a long time, because maybe compared to China, for example, you have a bureaucracy. You have what's it called? What's it called in politics? Where democracy. And whereas there's a certain vision by a certain one leader in China, for example, and they implement that. But in India, you've got lots of different people trying to influence. So I think it's very, very different. So anyway, what I learned in the US, I was traveling every second week, Monday to Friday, from London to San Francisco, just to build the startup, build the brand, build everything, build partners, networks. And that's like 11 hours each way, 8 hours time difference. It was quite grueling again, but it was worth it, because in the end, you end up with that the sort of endpoint, which really an IPO listing or an exit is an endpoint only for the investors, because at the end of the day, you're still working on it, and a lot of people still continue or then try other things. And a lot of entrepreneurs I interview on the Silicon Grapevine, you'll see they've not just done one, they've done 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's the other thing, you see. The reason I do Silicon Grapevine, and I think I did a magazine called The Chili, back in 2002, was to profile CEOs and people in the industry who can be role models, who can inspire. I remember once going to Sir Robin Saxby's house when I was doing The Chili, which was a magazine for tech entrepreneurs I started in 2002 after the ARC IPO, with friends, Bipin Parmar and Waz Ahmed. Basically, we started with sitting in this house here in the conservatory, was thinking, what do we do next? And said, let's do a magazine for the semiconductor hardware space for entrepreneurs, because there isn't really a resource. This was before TechCrunch, so you didn't have TechCrunch. I remember once, I think I met, I think there's a magazine in India called Your Story, and I met one of the editors there, and when I told him I'd started the Chile, they knew about it. So it was, I think there was some history with that as well. So yes, I went to Robin Saxby's house, and he showed me all the stuff and his inspirations, whatever. I did a very big profile on that, on Robin, and I just found from looking at the stats on that, because I was very early in those online days in 2002, looking at the stats, and the traffic on those interviews with the role models or the CEOs always were high. So it's interesting to sort of get those role models. And that was the startup career. And then after 2002, after I left ARC, then consulting, mentoring, advising, a few other media startups. But I worked with 3 other startups, which basically they got to an exit. I also worked with Dialog Semiconductor. Again, my profile's all there. And the other thing, being in the right place at the right time, I was on a shuttle bus in Bangalore at the IESA, in Indian. Well, it was called Indian Semiconductor Association at that time, not IESA. That was 2000 or 1998, 99. No, sorry, 2008 or 2009. And they had their Semiconductors Vision Summit, and I met somebody on the shuttle bus from the hotel to the conference center, and I told him my background. So he worked for British government, UK trade office, and he said, well, you should talk to my boss when you go back to London. So that's how I ended up getting a job as an advisor to UK government as a tech advisor, doing 5 years work. Again, it's always serendipity, right place, right time. So anyway, coming to EE Times, 2017, I think one of my ex-colleagues from many years ago, he's called me up, and I was just doing some mentoring that time at some programs in London Business School. And so he called me up, I think it was October 2017. He said, what are you up to, Nitin? I said, nothing. What do you want me to do? And that's another thing. I always ask people, what do you want me to do? So that way, I get to find out what they really need, rather than sort of saying, I can only do this. There's an Indian comedian, I think his name is Rahul Subramaniam. And I went to a show of his in London 3 years ago. And he picks on people in the audience. And there's a clip he uses for his promotional videos, and I think it's there, where he picks on me. And so we have a 5 or 7 minute banter. And the first thing I ask, he asks me, what do you do? And I tell him, what would you like me to do? And then it just starts the whole humor. So anybody who watches that, find that Rahul Subramanian clip from London, and I think you'll see me talking, and just that fun banter. So anyway, that's how I started. So EE Times basically called me up and said, we need a correspondent. So that's how I joined EE Times. So I think various things that are all written somewhere.
Okay, so what changes have you observed in India and around world in semiconductor industry before and after COVID?
I think it's been over the last few years. I think COVID I think has just accelerated things like the technologies to enable online working. So I started virtual working in 2002. So I was using Skype video with my clients when I started working after ARC. But I think what's key over since COVID, I think, is just people have accepted it as a way of working. But I think for that, companies and technology companies have improved things like the streaming, the compression, the capability of processing on devices, so that you can basically do it on your phone as well. So there's so much in terms of not necessarily just COVID, but I think COVID has accelerated that. And then the other thing I think is the thing that over the last 5-6 years I think I've seen is the autonomy trying to strive for this, applying this machine learning and everything, and then the autonomous vehicles and just autonomy in general. And we've seen implementations of that, not in necessarily on the road driving, but things like controlled environments, for example, on industry in buses, sort of in airports and things like that. So I think there's a lot of the autonomy. There's the connectivity. I think connectivity has improved. I don't know, a lot over the last few years, and definitely since COVID. Obviously, you need it for all what we're doing today, which is live streaming and also recording this kind of video. So I think those are probably the key things I've seen changed. And obviously, we've seen progression since the 80s, 90s in terms of semiconductor technologies as well, and just that Moore's law progression, I guess. I mean, people use Moore's law. I mean, I think it's just a way of getting out of explaining something that you want to explain. So you just say Moore's law.
Okay, so now Make in India concept is here. So how are other countries' perspective changing? Since you travel a lot, you get to meet a lot of people. Is it changing perspective about India? This Make in India thing?
It's not me. I think there is awareness where people like me who write about it, internationally, but I don't think it's on necessarily a Make in India. I think it's this whole sort of global movement amongst major economies to become self-sufficient. So it's not necessarily about Make in India. It's about, the perspective. I'm not talking about your perspective in India. I'm talking about perspective from outside, and how it's seen is, well, India's just trying to do what everybody else is trying to do, which is basically bring some supply chain resilience, some less dependence on other economies or countries for some of the advanced technologies or even mainstream technologies. So I think that's probably the only way I would say is it's perceived. I don't think it's made an impact as it should have. Maybe not sure why. Maybe there's not. People still see Indians visibly in Silicon Valley and see them and think they're the more important people than the stuff coming out of India per se. So I think it's not because we seem to as Indians, and I say we. I'm Indian and British, but we seem to have a better view of ourselves than other people do outside of India, if you know what I mean.
Okay, so you have traveled around the world and have a solid understanding of fully developed and thriving semiconductor ecosystem. What do we need in India to establish a thriving semiconductor ecosystem? Government is trying, but we need more.
I think it's there's a problem because I started a magazine with ex-editor of E! Times called The Next Silicon Valley, and we used to write a lot about all these innovation ecosystems around the world that are trying to build their own Silicon Valley, and that's sort of partly trying to address your question here. And like anything, you need the right policy, but also it's less around government and more around the talent, the funding, and the customers. Now, if you don't have all three, then whatever government is going to spend, you're not going to get it. So, for example, you have your OSATs that you're setting up, or you're setting up various design startup programs. They're all great, but I think what it needs is then an understanding of how do they progress to the next step. So, for example, you have a startup, the DLI scheme. How do you progress to the next step? How can they tape out? How can they then get sort of customers? And where will they get customers? Are they going to be in India? Are they going to be outside? And then where are they going to manufacture? For the advanced technologies, I don't think there are any. I mean, apart from 28 nanometer, I don't think there's anything sort of more advanced there in India being proposed at the moment. So then you'll still be dependent on the TSMCs, the Samsung, and maybe Intel, but it's not just about one point. It's about all things working together. And I just had a panel in Barcelona this week on what Europe can do better to exactly the same question. And the problem is it comes down to culture. It comes down to the right policies. It comes down to having the funding and the risk appetite and the customers. I mean, I take Europe as an example because I don't live in India, so I can't tell you how much the funding is. But for example, in Europe, a startup will go to a VC or funding, and they'll say, we'll give you 5 million or 10 million. Let's say whatever it is, dollars, pounds, euros. We'll give you 5 million. You go to the same VC in Silicon Valley, and they'll probably put 50 million. So I think the point is there's no risk appetite. There's a lot of risk averseness to investing in maybe, and I think that's kind of the challenge Europe has, and maybe there's that kind of thinking in India. India is India. Every time I've worked with Indian companies, the one thing I've realized is they don't have a professional approach to thinking. They'll say, okay, no, we won't pay them, or we won't do this, or we won't do that. So I think it's very hard for Indian culture to value anything which is not like a doctor or an accountant or somebody who's doing something which in their minds is useful. So I think, I've tried in the past providing PR services, and people never want to pay. They want everything free. So the question is, if that's the case, is an investor going to invest? I know some of the angel investors in India, and I don't know whether they're really doing big buck investing, or whether they're just sort of seeding it just to see where it goes, and if it doesn't happen, that's fine. So I think it's a cultural thing, and more risk taking, and it's not all about government. But I think the Prime Minister is doing well in terms of pushing for people to sort of go that way, and I think it's not all dependent on him and the government. It really needs a cultural shift as well. And if you have people coming back from Silicon Valley and from the US trying to do that, and then they find themselves frustrated, they're not going to stay. They'll go back.
They're good. Yes. Since you have mentioned about investment in Europe, so I have a question regarding that. That came in news that Europe has released their policy for semiconductor, and I have seen multiple posts on that. And a huge amount of investment is there. Especially, I'm connected with the MD of Silicon Saxony in Dresden area. There is a lot of investment. Since it's a very connected thing, the whole I watched you interviewed Art. Here he mentioned that together either we win, we will, or we lose. It's very connected industry. So is there any chance that in India the kind of investment is happening in Europe, we get a little bit of benefit of investment? Means a lot of project, a lot of work, new project, new circuit, new chip, everything is new. So AI is enabling new things. So is there any chance that India, being a part of the whole ecosystem across world, we are getting something as a country? Some projects are coming here, few more.
So the thing is, India has real value, which I think I think I interviewed some people in India when I came last February or March, April, and I think those interviews are on the Times. But I think one of the things India has value, but it's not pushing itself through the whole supply chain on that, and the value is in the design that it's been doing for all the major chips. And one very good example of a consumer company I've interviewed is Boat Lifestyle, which they do the earbuds. They've got some amazing people in terms of the engineering team, and what using that as an example. I mean, if you had everything through the supply chain, which could then be serviced for them in India, then that's what would you could use that whole supply chain and then think, okay, well, they still have to go to international majors for some chips, and then they have to go for manufacturing elsewhere. So then the question is, can you put bits of those? If you break down the whole value chain there, there are still quite a few elements on the post design where you still need a lot more in India, which you don't have. And are you making the right investments there for that? For that, I think that would be the key to sort of making India sustainable to a certain extent. Well, yeah. But I think it's not going to happen until you address the whole value chain, not just design or not just assembly and test. There needs to be a lot more.
In fact, I can tell you, Nitin, there is we don't heard much, we don't listen much about this board thing and how to assemble a board, and because after all the chip is going to get used on a board, it will sit on a board. So we hear very less about here about this board thing. So recently we invited Peter Drovak. He does a lot of work on board in TSP just to discuss it, because a student, when he is in trying to enter VLSI, he must have an idea that it's not all about designing the chip. Once it's got the tape out, where it would go, it will be going to sit on a board, then the whole assembly will get done, then it will be a part of a device. So yes, I agree, you very much agree on this point what you are saying. We must concentrate on the other points of the value chain. Really, it's important. Okay, so you attend a lot of conferences. So first, why it's very important to attend all of these fairs, conferences, and what are some conferences? Are all conference for everyone, or for depending on levels, like some for beginners, some for professionals, some for mid-level executives? How can we differentiate?
I mean, it's the reason I go is because I get invited because of my position. So I wouldn't recommend that, if you're an engineer, student, whatever, you go to every conference. The value of these conferences, and I think I would say to anybody, is, I mean, one of them is obviously networking. So meeting peers, but also meeting potential customers, partners. I mean, for students, maybe potential employers as well. So that's one thing. What the conference organizers would want primarily is for you to also learn those conferences, but I think that is sometimes a secondary part of it, because you can learn, I guess, online as well. So I think that's there's a lot you can learn online. Although I'm probably of a generation which I find it easier to learn from people in a room, in the same room. So I think that's just me. But I think the importance of conferences is definitely networking, exchanging ideas, and then obviously learning as well. But you learn from exchanging ideas as well. So I think that's quite important. And what was the? Oh, so how do you differentiate this? Differentiate. I mean, if you go to, for example, I go to Embedded World in Germany, for example, Nuremberg, which is the big show for the embedded systems industry, and I think a lot of people who go there might be looking for things which they're designing in, and they want to get some ideas of what whether they're at a chip level, or whether there might be a board level or a software. So they just want to get an idea of who's doing what, but also attend some of the conferences and maybe meet some of the potential customers and partners. So I think that you decide based on that. But if you're looking maybe for investment, then you might want to go for some of the higher level conferences. I can't think of a good example, but in Silicon Valley, they have a lot of those at a higher level, the investment conferences. So you need to pitch your elevator deck and all that, and elevator pitch, sorry, and just get your message out there, and what pain points you're addressing, and why they should put money in you and all that. So, but I think it just varies depending on what it is, and if it's like learning management skills, then it's very different. But I think you don't necessarily. I think most of the conferences I go to are usually technology conferences and the startup conferences and the investor conferences.
During my research days, I have attended few conferences because of I was presenting there. I always found one thing, that off-session talks are really good. I mean, some seniors are standing there and they are talking. Even if you just stand and listen to them, you will get to know so many things, because those sessions are even more interesting rather than on session, because that's really good.
And I think one of the things I find when I go to conferences, and especially in the US and maybe some in Europe, people are more accessible at whatever level they are. Whereas, you won't necessarily access them if you went to their company and sort of ask for audience with them. But if there's a conference session and you're all walking out and you have a conversation about it, and you happen to be talking to the CEO of, I don't know, IBM or something like that. It's just it's
and that energy, that's amazing. That energy, that's contagious.
Exactly.
A CEO is standing there. Obviously, there is some good reason. That's why he is CEO. You are talking to him face to face. That energy, that's amazing.
Exactly.
Obviously.
Exactly.
I get to talk to few scientists, because I have attended academic IEEE conferences for my papers in my research days. So big scientists, I talk to them. Their energies, that was awesome feeling. That gives goosebumps.
One of the things with scientists, and I tried this week as well, because the conference I was at this week was a High Peak, is a high performance computing conference, and it's a community of researchers and academics and some industry in high performance computing systems architectures and embedded systems architectures. And quite often when I'm talking to scientists and researchers, it's for me, what I want to do is then translate. I'm like a feed in and then feed out. So if they're feeding information in, I need to figure out what is it that the audience will understand from this, because scientists and researchers don't always tell the story in the way which is comprehensible to a wider audience. And I think I had a few conversations like that this week. For example, somebody was talking about a 128-bit general purpose microprocessor.
Excuse me.
Sure. But it's just that I couldn't get some of the. I needed to get, why are you doing it? What I always ask the questions, why, and how's it going to benefit, and what are the key things. So then we can that way I'm able to write about it as well. Then.
Okay, so some game-changing advancement of 2024, according to you?
Well, I think over the last 2 years, we've just seen this whole thing with generative AI. But I think the focus initially has been on those large language models. But what will now change is the ability to put what I think some people are calling small language models. Sort of the edge intelligence. And I think we've been using that term for a few years, but I think it's I think I wrote an article this week on agentic AI, and it might sound all very high level, but I think it's all technologies, the microcontrollers, the neural network accelerators, and all that you're going to put on to enable some local decision making, but also reasoning. It's not, so you learn maybe from your local sort of inputs of data, what your likes and dislikes. I mean, that's kind of what I'm hearing. It'd be interesting to see if actually it happens.
Okay. I was very moved with the news that EV lithography machine. I saw one article that machine is delivered to Japan.
Okay.
Big size machine. IMEC and ASML, they have collaboration on that.
Yeah.
That lithography machine has come.
Yeah.
That news was really that I
So,
like the news really, and
so yeah, go
some.
on.
Another news is that cryogenic semiconductor, and I read one article from Professor Asenov of Glasgow
Oh,
University
yes.
that their
Yeah.
PDK is used there. So that
Mm,
news also,
yeah.
I was so many things are happening.
Um, you know,
Exciting time.
I stood when I walked along this ASML machine. I went to IMEC. Not last year, I think the year before. I had gone to IMEC, and they'd given media a tour of the labs. And so this, you just walk and walk and walk. This machine is so large,
So large,
it's a advanced EUV machine, but
advanced. Yes.
you're always amazed by the scale.
Mm.
But then ultimately, it's the nanometer
Yes.
technology, so which is
That's a that
so.
is completely. I mean, the machine is so big and it's used for so tiny chip. I mean, that's amazing fact.
But then you think about the crypto, the will. If you look at the Google Willow launch last year,
Mm.
and I think if you look in their explanations as to why you need all that big, the common thing you see for quantum computing, it's all the cooling. You have to go down to 4K Kelvin, so it's the different stages of cooling to get the chip working at the right temperature, so that you can then reduce the amount of errors. So I think, uh, maybe we didn't mention it, but maybe there's going to be some potential from quantum with something like, I don't know how Willow is going to advance. I haven't looked into it. I haven't done some more research, but I guess it'll be things like that, and which will be uh, advancing some of the quantum capabilities, but also then security is going to come to the fore as well. I'm just thinking, how are we going to deal with quantum sort of breaking all our secure payment systems, for example?
There
So
are so
that's
many good
maybe
news. I
maybe
follow your
that's something.
column.
Maybe that's something that the Indian research community can probably figure out and find something.
I can say about that. I mean, I follow your column, I follow your post. If I follow you, I mean, you are almost like a globetrotter of semiconductors. So, if we follow you, we get to know which conference is happening where, and your pics, amazing pictures are there. So, it's I always
Certainly.
find that it's written somewhere. Is there any post came from Nitin? Okay, let's see. There is something good, some exciting news is there. Okay, so what changes
Yeah.
do you see in field of robotics and mechatronics? I mean, in real impact on
Um,
human civilization, robotics and
it's
mechatronics.
all. Yeah, I saw some interesting. I'm not sure if it was at CES actually, in this year. There is. Um, I'm trying to think. There was a Taiwanese company I met, or maybe a couple of others, where they're actually enabling those movements, which are like finger like. They've got this kind of movement now with the mechatronics and the robotics. I'm trying to think of the name of the company. It might come to me after we finish, but it's definitely when a company like the biggest company in the world, the CEO puts robots on the stage next to him at his keynotes. Jensen Huang, the NVIDIA keynotes for the last 2 years, he's been putting those robots. And if you look at some of what they're doing, but also outside of that, robotics. I think somebody told me there's a lot of investment going into robotics, and even Eric Schmidt, for example, ex Google, is putting investments into robotics. So I think there's going to be a lot more there, but not in the sense of the Will Smith iRobot movie, but more in the sense of things that will assist on everyday life. So the thing that we did with industrial automation, with the industrial revolution and all that, and I think it'll be more around uh, assisting our sort of industry living and all that.
Yes.
And in Japan already, for example, they have the comfort robots and things like that. I mean, they're experimenting with those. So maybe there will be things like that as well. I mean, I see just Indians all have parents, aged parents who they look after. So now we have as well. And one of the things might be those companion robots that can help and do things. It's always difficult to find in the Western world help for your older parents. So maybe
Yeah.
there's those kind of things as well. But it needs a cultural sort of acceptance of that as well. So that's another thing.
Yes. Yeah, I saw one post where a person who is paralyzed for almost more than 10 years is wearing a suit and carrying the Olympic torch across the Paris, city of Paris,
Wow.
and people
Okay.
are
Yeah.
applauding it.
Yeah.
So this kind of a person who cannot stand for 10 years, if he can feel it again, that
Yeah.
kind of innovation, I mean, it's amazing
So
when it touches lives.
I want one
It's
technology. I'm really looking for something which is Stephen Hawking type technology, but in the modern age, where you can tap into your neural networks. And I'm telling you specifically because I have personal experience of somebody who basically suffered major brain damage, and they are able to communicate. No, sorry, they're not able to communicate because that affects their speech and
brain.
everything else. But if there's a way of tapping into that neural network, and I know there are companies that are doing it for chronic diseases and all that, but I think it'd be quite interesting if you can tap into that and allow them to speak, so we understand exactly what they're saying. I have a personal reason for that right now, but if that can be done, if anybody in the audience knows how to do that, then that's something I'd be interested in exploring.
Yeah, actually, I was browsing and I found so many new things are happening. Flex IC is one thing from UK.
Yeah,
So many good
yeah.
things are happening. I think I said, no, exciting times ahead. Very
Yeah,
exciting time.
that Flex, I think it was a pragmatic semiconductor.
Yeah.
They did
Yes.
a keynote this week in Barcelona at
Yeah.
the High Performance
I'm
Computing.
connected to few persons of that company, so I get to see their post,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's amazing. The concept is very very nice, very amazing.
Bendable electronics.
Yes.
Yeah,
So for last decade, smartphone devices dominated. What do you think? What is in coming decades will dominate?
it's very difficult to
Smartphone.
say. Very
Okay.
difficult to say, but I think uh, I can't say in a very qualified way. Quantum, what will that do? Because I don't know. But I think definitely if this promise of these personal assistants materializes, and I guess there are many companies commercially who are interested in doing that now. So then, if that's the case, maybe that's something that's going to change things. I mean, I've sat in so many pitches and presentations where they say, "Oh, I want to organize my holiday vacation or my holiday, and I will just tell my computer, and it will organize everything, and it will do this." I don't see the reality of that, but I think maybe people do use it. But I think let's see, maybe it's those personal assistants. Also, I think, as you said, robotics. I think that might be the next thing as well. Maybe moving from the industrial environment into the consumer environment.
Yeah, if advancement of technology is reflected to is our daily livelihood, and especially for those who are not able to function properly in normal way, then that's the best thing, I guess. I
Yeah,
mean, they are deprived of some good things in life, and if technology can help them, that's best.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
best. It gives a kind of
But
confidence.
but there's one thing. Doing what's good is not always going to be the same as doing what's commercially right.
Yes, that's the
So
thing. Yeah, end of day, it's business.
exactly.
Yes, exactly. Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So I'm done with my questions, and do you have anything specific in your mind you want to share with our audience, with youngsters, to inspire them? Anything?
I think the biggest lesson from my um, journey is just have an open mind, uh, be open to going beyond what you've been taught. And I think in India, it's very much like, okay, you've been trained to be an engineer, you have to be an engineer. Um, Maybe there are other things you can do in engineering, which I think I wouldn't say I'm a extremely good example, but I'm a good example of being able to adapt. So adapt to
Yeah.
whatever, but staying within the industry.
Mm.
And I think it's not always the case that you have to be a design engineer or you have to be a software
Verification
engineer.
engineer. Yeah.
Yeah,
Verification
so
engineer.
it may be that there are other parts of it that you just didn't realize you're good at. So always, tap into, here and say, well, look, maybe I can do this as well.
Yes.
And do what what I do. Yeah. What do you want me to do?
What you want me to do? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I would recommend listening to that clip from Rahul, the
yeah.
comedian.
Yeah, sure. I will find. Okay, sure. Thank you. You answered all our questions, and I enjoyed the session. What
Oh,
about
thank
you?
you. I
I mean,
like
yeah,
talking. I like
one
talking.
thing one thing I must share with my viewers, that not every senior shows professional trust. Nitin showed it. I sent him invitation within 10 minutes without knowing much about us, Tech Simplified TV. He said, "Yes, I'm very interested. I'm curious about your audience." So that kind of trust, we are junior to you in every aspect. It's a great encouragement for us. There's some moment comes when moments of doubt. That time I always remember that Nitin trusted on us.
Oh,
We
well.
should not give up. It's a
Well,
great encouragement, and probably till now, I mean, uh, I have a partner in Tech Simplified TV. Mridul has interviewed Mike Engelhardt, so I was looking for a celebrity to interview, and today I have interviewed another celebrity. So, um, score is same now.
right. Well, you're equal now. Yeah. As they say in tennis, love all. Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, we level up now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Nitin. Thank you for coming, and
Thank you.
viewers, follow us, and like, share, and subscribe to Tech Simplified TV, and always try to follow the Semiconductor podcast. Here we celebrate technology, we talk about technology, and the person who are connected to our domain. It's our domain. Let's make it better, beautiful. So thank you
Thank you.
for staying with us for till now, and thank you. Bye for today. We are closing our stream here now. Bye.
Bye.